Satoshi, he left behind a treasure of approximately 1 million Bitcoin. He left them out there in plain sight. Everyone can see them. Every Bitcoin is visible to every person in the world who looks at its public record, commonly known as the blockchain. The value of these coins that grows colossally as the value of Bitcoin does. It is the biggest pile of Bitcoins in the world that belongs to any one entity, and it will almost certainly remain the biggest forever. If Bitcoin becomes all the money in the world, it will be the largest stockpile of money in the world, yet nobody can take any of it. It is in plain sight, yet it's untouchable. Joining us today, we have the editor-in-chief for Swan, who's unlocked the secret of the treasure Satoshi Nakamoto left behind. Thomas Strolight, it's such an honor. Let's start off. What is money?
Well, as I say in that piece, and I'll see if I can remember it off the top of my head, pure money, true money, is simply the instrument by which people exchange what they have, their time, their money, their time, their possessions, their energy, peacefully for the time and energy or for the money of somebody else, which then they can use to purchase the time, the energy, and the property of other people. It is what peaceful people use to deal with each other in peace. So money is peace. Money is the thing that breaks us from that realm of relying on force to get things, and it allows us to plan for the future. It's a uniquely human instrument, right? Humans are really the only creatures that we know of that use money, that use a medium in between exchanges. Other animals, they live by the law of the jungle. They take what's theirs, or if there is some kind of mutual exchange, it's the exchange of one good for another. They barter, right? The nectar that the insects enjoy, they immediately are saddled with pollen that they need to pollinate the next flower over with. So barter exists, taking by force exists, but exchanging for future use is something that only human beings have come up with. And that's really what money is. It allows me to work for not the thing that I'm going to ultimately consume, not in barter, and then ultimately ultimately use that money for somebody else's specialized work later on. So it's really a huge part of what makes human specialized civilization possible. It's a necessary condition for human civilization to exist. And the more honest it is, the greater the civilization, I believe.
Yeah. Before we dive in, because Satoshi Nakamoto left behind this extraordinary treasure that the whole world's either looked at or they're starting to wake up and look at. It seems like Bitcoin sort of came out of nowhere and it's sitting there. And in that article that we can dive into, the legendary treasure of Satoshi Nakamoto, the largest pile of money in the world, yet nobody can touch it. How's that differ to what most people currently think is money, and why is that important for maybe the advancement of civilization as a whole, to be able to have a form of money that cannot be coerced or stolen or debased?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it changes right? If the game of money, we'll call it a game. If the rules of money are such that it can be got through fraud, or it can be got through theft, then there is incentive to commit fraud and incentive to commit theft in the game of money. And of course there is. Right? Fraud and theft are rampant in our civilization, and it's what's ruining our civilization, that the institutions that are meant to protect us from fraud and theft have now become corrupted and are themselves committing fraud and theft with the money. So it's a really gigantic leap forward to say, well, if you fix the money so that fraud and theft become a much, much, much smaller possibility within the money, then the game no longer incentivizes fraud and theft. It incentivizes honesty and productivity. And if you have a world where the honest and productive are rewarded and the dishonest and fraudulent are not rewarded, fewer people will choose the career path of becoming frauds, and thieves. And and the most successful people in the world will be the people who actually exhibit honor. And you won't have this seeming dichotomy between, well, if you want to be rich, you got to be evil. If you want to be successful in this world, you got to make other people your victims, right? There's no victims in money that's exchanged mutually, right, through mutual agreement by two people who are voluntarily doing it. There's all sorts of things that are wrong with when you have a handful of people printing money, seizing it, using armies to seize it, using it to fund wars. So it's a huge leap forward. And money that is unseizable is money that can't be taken by force. And so there's a lot of Bitcoiners who talk a lot about Bitcoin being peace, and people wonder, where are you getting this crazy idea from that Bitcoin is peace? And said, well, when you take away the incentive for force, you take away the reward that comes with using force. You take away what people fight wars for, which is the reward of utilizing force on another human being or other human beings or entire other nations. And so when you take that away and you replace it with, you have to earn my money, and you cannot seize it, you cannot take it by killing me, you have an instrument of peace.
Yeah. And it just feels like the more time and the more hours that you put into Bitcoin, I don't know if I didn't get into Bitcoin to seek a higher level of understanding or a higher level of consciousness or enlightenment. I came to get fabulously rich, fabulously wealthy. Yeah. I heard that this was number go up technology, and I got in, and it took me a little while to understand it. But once I understand, I'm like, okay, this thing's going up forever. But what I found
is this ultimate bait and switch, right? But normally
that's crazy.
is a crooked thing, right? You come in expecting to get something for your money, and they give you something less. But Bitcoin gives you something totally more, right? It makes you come in looking for this get rich quick scheme, and you end up getting these values that money itself can't even buy. And this is a big part of. I've written quite a few pieces about this, but it's a very big part of. It's the whole central thesis behind the legendary Treasure of Satoshi Nakamoto article that I wrote. It's like, why does Bitcoin cause this spiritual awakening in people when it doesn't promise to? And in the meantime, all these other things that promise to give you spiritual awakenings really struggles to do so. What's going on here? And I think that this is what's amazing journey of hearing the story of Bitcoin, of experimenting with it, and of realizing, well, this isn't some Disney story. This isn't some Hollywood movie. This is real. This really happened, is really happening. And it really is a story of hope and justice and honor and freedom and all of these wonderful words that we've thrown around and been told are really valuable, but seem to be slipping through our fingers or have already disappeared in our civilization. And Bitcoin is bringing them back, and it's bringing back not just great wealth in the sense of, trinkets and Rolls Lamborghinis. It's bringing back honor. It's bringing back productivity. It's bringing back value. And this is what I say, what Satoshi did was he did not use his money to buy frivolous wealth. He didn't spend it on hookers and coke and fancy trips. He put it there as a monument to what Bitcoin represents and what it stands for and what the potential of humanity as a whole is when it's coordinated through good, honest money.
Yeah, it's pretty wild that money, like once you go down the rabbit hole, it makes sense that money should empower your life and allow you to follow your higher purpose. But we haven't had money that works. Probably in human history, we've never had money that works this well, that leads to these profound insights. So I think it takes quite a lot for people that just get into the space to understand. They may hear what we're talking about and be like, this seems a little bit esoteric. Like, I just want to get rich, guys. And I don't care about spirituality. Well, unfortunately or fortunately, I think going through that process, your life becomes easier. You start to feel hope. And then when you feel hope, then you start seeing things just outside your immediate material possessions, and it automatically leads there. You've written some brilliant articles, Timer, like absolutely incredible. I've linked your Medium below for people, and I'd highly encourage everyone that is watching live, watching the replay, is smash the like button, but check out Timer's links to the Medium. One thing that I heard in another podcast that you're in is you only deal with men of honor. And it's through Bitcoin that's led there. And I think this is part, again, of that spiritual unfolding that is the money of Bitcoin. What did you mean by that? Like, I thought that was pretty profound. As you go more and more down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, you're like, I'm only going to deal with men of honor. How's that show up in your life?
Well, there's so many different angles to this. Let's build a contrast between what is a man of honor and someone who acts dishonorably. And this isn't intended to be complete in its definition and through its examples, but men of honor are people who tell the truth. They're people who live up to their word, that when they make a promise, they will follow through to the best of their abilities. And if they don't follow through, they'll make amends for having failed to keep their word. They respect you. They show respect. They appreciate that you have rights, and they honor your rights. Right? They honor things. They honor honesty. They honor virtue. And when you're dealing with people who you want to call your friends or your business associates or anything of that nature, you want to trust them. Bitcoin has this slogan, don't trust, verify. But Bitcoiners, ironically, are people who can trust each other a great deal because they've chosen a system where you can't get away with dishonorable activity. Bitcoin does not. So Bitcoin has attracted all these people who loathe cheating, who loathe lying. And so they don't commit it themselves. And so in the hardcore Bitcoiner community, you have these incredible brotherhoods, right? This friendship that forms very, very deeply and very, very quickly. And I think that's the natural state of brotherly love that actually should and ought to exist, as long as you don't live in a corrupt society filled with dishonor. Our fiat money system is a system of dishonor, right? It's a system where some people try to convince everybody through deceit and deception and hiding behind curtains that inflation is good and healthy and the taxation is good and healthy. And these are, of course, the people who benefit from inflation.
Of course.
Convince all the people who are victims of these things that this is the best way, that anything else, deflation or no taxation, you'd have no roads, the economy would collapse. So these are dishonorable people, and you have nothing to gain by a relationship with them. Their relationship is parasitic on you. They take your time, they take your energy, they take your property, and they give you nothing in return other than lies. Whereas men of honor ask for your time, your energy, your property, and they give you something in return. If it's economic, they can give you money in return. But the thing that isn't economic is they can give you their friendship in return, their trust, love. And their ideas and their intelligence. And so this is a much richer way to live than to live scrapping over, watching your back, cheating others while being cheated. That's a zero-sum game. That's actually negative-sum game. Whereas the positive sum, the creative sum of dealing with people who are honorable is a much better condition to be in. And again, I think it's the more sustainable human condition to exist within. But we have to be vigilant and protect ourselves from the dishonorable, and hopefully convert the dishonorable to honorable activities. But we live in a world right now where dishonor is presumed to be the human condition. It's presumed to be the natural condition, that people lie, cheat, and steal, and are selfish and can't be trusted. And I don't think that that's true at all. I think that that's just the side effect of the predominant ideas of the day and the effects of the technology that we use for money principally.
And sort of a little bit of a conundrum in the space. Like Bitcoin maxis are labeled as these toxic psychopaths that don't care about anyone, who are just ruthless. That's the mainstream narrative that comes across. But It's exactly the opposite. I think the reason that we are so loud and so noisy is because we will call out the toxicity that is there's a plethora of within that fiat mind virus system, that matrix.
Well, what I would say to that is I wrote this one article called "Bitcoiners Are Not Toxic, They Have Integrity." And in that article, I point out, Bitcoiners are called toxic. And what I will try to point out in that article, what I say I will, which I think I do, is that what outsiders are referring to as toxic is actually the virtue of integrity. Bitcoiners are adhering to the truth. They're saying, if you do this, you will break that. And there are people who are like, well, that hurt my feelings, or that's rude for you to point out that I'm wrong and to try to tell me that I'm wrong. And I draw a parallel to building a bridge. It's say if you build a bridge that isn't going to stand, people will lose their lives if the bridge doesn't have integrity. And if you point out that making certain changes to the bridge will cause it to collapse, well, then congratulations, you too have integrity, especially if you were paid off to say something different. I mean, you've adhered to integrity, and so you and the bridge both possess this similar virtue of withstanding corruption. And that's what is often labeled as toxic. Right? When Bitcoiners say inflation is bad, taxation is theft, shitcoins are enriching the founders, and have no decentralization. This is what we get called toxic for. And what are all those things? They're all courageous declarations in the face of deception to maintain the integrity of the system that we have, which we view as precious. So for people who try to label Bitcoiners as toxic, what they're actually quite often doing is dishonorable. It's a slanderous comment when you see someone who's virtuous, to label them as vicious, right? To talk toxic as poisonous, but instead virtue, integrity is keeping a thing alive, keeping a thing going. So it's a complete inversion of what's actually going on. And I would recommend people read that article, because it's one of the better ones I've written, and it really fleshes out this idea.
And I think like some of the biggest pushback that we get as Bitcoiners, and I'd highly urge everyone to read as many of your articles. They're all really short as well. They don't take really long. You've put a lot of thought into it. You've really condensed down the signal and pushed it out. I've got like so many things. I started this podcast off with a tiny little paragraph out of the legendary treasurer Satoshi Nakamoto. Ladies and gentlemen, treat yourself. These are absolutely brilliant articles. Like, definitely read all of them and enjoy them. Toma, say Elizabeth Warren and Peter Schiff attack Bitcoin from every angle, and Bitcoiners can see through it very clearly. To me, Peter's a bitter old man. I think it's a little bit sinister than that, because he's misleading people for so long. I'd just prefer if he just stopped talking about it. He's a pretty good troll. He got most of it right. He just can't understand that Bitcoin has that value. But Elizabeth Warren, for example, and we don't need to go into the politics side of things, but just her as an individual presents this very evangelistic image to the public. She's here for the little people. But the thing that is so evil, so toxic, is the tool that can give hope and freedom back to an individual or back to humanity. Will there be a point where people actually wake up and they do their own research and study? Like, we're
there. Look, we are there. There are people every day. Every single day, more people become Bitcoiners. Every single day, more Bitcoiners go further down the rabbit hole and further down the journey to discover that this thing works, that it can work, that it will work, that it's unstoppable, that it has integrity, that it has honor. All these things we've been discussing already on this show today. And there are people who choose not to. And there are people who choose not to because they're not interested in the topic. There are people who choose not to because they're afraid that what we're saying may be true, and too much of their life is engaged in the other side of the world, the dishonorable side. I think that's where a lot of politicians end up finding themselves, right? Like I said at the beginning, Bitcoin is this bait and switch. You come in looking to get rich quick, and then it develops all these honorable traits and virtues within you. Politics, I think, is, from what I see, is the opposite. People come in with these grand visions of, I want to help the world, and very quickly they realize they can't make the changes within there at all, and there's temptations to become corrupted and powerful, and they don't even notice how subtly they're making promises that they never deliver on, and they're getting rich by taking gifts from lobbyists and investment hot tips and all these kinds of things, and then they end up seeing themselves getting off a private jet, being filmed by somebody who's saying, "What are you doing on a private jet, Elizabeth Warren?" and hiding behind her aides, because she knows that what she's done is wrong, and she wants to hide it from herself and others. And there's no transparency there. There's no explanation. There's hiding behind people, and so that is, and she's lost. I mean, she did not achieve what she set out to. She continues to repeat what she says she set out to achieve. I'll give her the benefit of the doubt and say that she entered politics as an honest, ambitious individual. But there's no question in my mind right now that she's not interested in that. She's interested in getting reelected. She's interested in power, and so she's surrendered her integrity. She's not an individual who possesses integrity. Peter Schiff is, I don't even really want to talk about him. It's more, he seems like a joke to me, because here's someone who's so caught up in Bitcoin, who's got to talk about it every hour of every day, every time there's a movement. It doesn't take a lot of intelligence to see that what he's saying about Bitcoin is not intelligent. Whether it's he focuses on a day when the price goes down and says, you see, it's all over, despite the fact that when you zoom out, he's been calling for it to go to zero since it was $10 or $100, and it's gone up thousands of times over. So that's just someone who's stuck in a rut, and it'd be nice to bring him over, but I don't think there's any hope of it. His mind is too closed. And so, but that doesn't prevent you and me from choosing Bitcoin. Bitcoin doesn't force anybody to choose it. The whole Bitcoin movement in the whole world, every single Bitcoiner is someone who chose it. They weren't born into Bitcoin. They weren't forced into Bitcoin by their government. This is a whole movement of people who've selected and voluntarily agreed to be part of it. And I hope that it continues to be that way for forever, rather than that people with guns force other people to use Bitcoin. So, but it's certainly at this point in history, Bitcoin is a completely voluntary project, and everyone who's in it is someone who wants to be in it, whether it's still to get rich quick financially, or for a broader purpose, to get the most that they possibly can out of their time in their life.
Yeah, it's the power of it's amazing. I'm so grateful to the Bitcoin community and the toxic maxis, I guess, that just no altcoins, it's Bitcoin only. And it takes you a while to understand why they're so vocal, but they need to be able to fight that counter narrative and, lead people down the right path. Want to flip gears? You've done some really fun articles as well. One that I thought was a whole lot of fun, and I'll bring it up here, was Hello, I Am Bitcoin.
Yeah. That was
I'll describe it the best I can, but you'll probably do it better justice. It sounds like you wrote Bitcoin in the first person, and it's just telling people about who it was, sort of as this individual entity that continues to survive, and the survival factor of Bitcoin was fascinating. I guess what made you write the article, and what was the point of going into that article?
Yeah, for me, a big part of this Bitcoin exploration has been this question: is Bitcoin actually alive? I certainly wasn't my idea originally, but there's been a few writers who wrote about how it's like, Brandon Quittem wrote about how it's like the mycelium of money, and Gigi wrote an article called Proof of Life. I wrote one trying to assess whether Bitcoin is a meta consciousness that uses our minds connected to each other's to think and solve its own problems, called How Bitcoin is Like a Giant Cybernetic Meta Brain. That's also in there. And so I was exploring that idea. And I also, in my book, Why Bitcoin, I wrote one article called Why Bitcoin is Worthy of Being Loved. And in it, Bitcoin speaks to you. So I had to do a small couple paragraphs. And so Bitcoin presents itself, and it says, look at me. I stand naked before you. You can explore every line of my code, and I keep these promises to you, and I never break these promises. And I really enjoyed writing in that point of view. And so a couple of years later on, I wondered, when ChatGPT was just coming out and there was all this stuff written like in AI style in its early days, I thought, I'm going to write in the style of ChatGPT, but in the voice of Bitcoin. And I sat down and I started pouring it out. And I think the opening lines are something like, hello, I am Bitcoin. I'm an artificial life form. I can't remember what I say exactly.
Let's bring it up. It's so good.
Yeah. So that hello, I'm Bitcoin. I'm an artificial life form. That simply means I am man-made. I'm a man-made living being. Hi. Do not think of me as purely a machine, though. I am not a machine, and I'm much more than a computer program. I survive. And so then I started to just pour into it. I think I channeled the spirit of Bitcoin, because
my
view is we are part of Bitcoin. People say we are all Satoshi, but we really are all a part of Bitcoin, in the same way that a cell is a part of you and a neuron is a part of your mind, and it's a small part of your consciousness. It's not the whole of it. I'm a small part of Bitcoin's consciousness, and so are you. And collectively together, we form this distributed, decentralized mind that has many thoughts simultaneously. But that's what I tried to pour out into this piece. And I kind of channeled it by surrendering into what Bitcoin is. So it was a fun writing exercise. It got a lot of attention, that piece. So quite a few people were triggered in a positive way by it, right? Not triggered into anger, but into thoughtfulness and contemplation about, well, is Bitcoin alive? Or at least it's interesting to see the world from Bitcoin's perspective. And that's what I wanted to give Bitcoin the voice to speak to humanity, to speak to individual human beings, and tell its side of the story of how it experiences this. Because we experience it as this money, we experience running nodes, but how does it experience humanity? How does it experience its existence and what it does with and for humans in order to achieve its survival?
Yeah. I don't know what the correct word is, Tomer, but when they make robots have like human-like features, so when they're around or whatever, we don't think they're that weird. And robots, they're just a tool, they're just programs. But for you, doing sort of a similar thing is giving Bitcoin that human wrapper to be able to appeal to people on such an emotional, deep level is really cool. It's actually quite a short article, but it stopped and made me think, and I was just like, huh. Yeah, I understand how Bitcoin's this living thing. It needs sustenance to be able to survive. If we, like you say in this article here, hello, I'm Bitcoin. If we no longer need its service, then it's just going to die. But if one person finds value, they're going to nurture it and they're going to feed it, and it's going to continue to work in symbiosis with humanity. It was a lovely article.
Yeah, I wrote a story for the Bitcoin Times, which I wrote a story for the Bitcoin Times. I think it was this issue or A New Hope. I can't remember. Oh, here it is. For this issue of the Bitcoin Times.
Yeah.
It was called The Being That Changed Everything. It's also on my Medium. And it's a storytelling of how Bitcoin becomes viewed as a living being by human civilization over the course of hundreds of years into the future. It's told in 4 chapters that zooms out to block 21 million. And the climactic event of the story is what humanity is doing with Bitcoin at block 21 million. So that's another fun one to read. But it again is just this notion of there's something more here than a computer program, right? And if I told you 10 years ago that there would be a computer program that people would be willing to die to continue to run it, and they'd be willing to die on that hill to run it.
Yeah.
You'd be thinking like some kind of computer game or a spreadsheet. It doesn't make sense. Are they addicted to it? What form of evil has come about here? But instead, this is good, right? They're prepared to fight for what they believe in, and they're prepared to run it. And the beauty is, of course, you don't have to die for it. Like, this is a battle for freedom that's fought asymmetrically in favor of the freedom favoring side.
It's amazing how peaceful it is. You know, maybe hyper Bitcoinization or a Bitcoin world takes a long time to play out, but I think as we shift there more and more, like on an individual level, you and I have, and nations are starting to, but just as it spreads more and more, it's like the fastest growing protocol in the world. I don't know if we'll have violence or not, but I think on an individual level, it just leads to a more peaceful life. And if people are at peace, they're maybe not going to engage with that so much. I just see a comment here that's definitely worth bringing up. On the eve of the halvening, Swan and Bit Intelligence will release a film with the legendary treasure of Satoshi Nakamoto by Toma, almost as exciting as the halving itself. Those videos that you've put together over your articles are absolutely incredible. If you just, everyone, just go into YouTube and search Toma Strolight and they come up. There's quite a few there as well. I'd like to hand the floor over to you, Toma. You've really thought really deeply, but what's most fascinating to you at the moment? Like, there's so many exciting things going on. Like, it's just TikTok next block. Bitcoin works as designed. We've got the halving in a couple of days. The price is pretty high, pretty low. Like, it's high from where we've been, pretty low for where we're going. But aside from those things, what is it that's really captivated your imagination lately?
I mean, for me, this spiritual side of Bitcoin, and I don't mean that as religious, although it can be for many people, but I mean it as the intangible, hope-filled, love-filled aspect of it, friendship-filled aspect of it, is what continues to fascinate me. And it fascinates me on the grounds of, well, I personally keep having more discoveries about myself. So thanks to Bitcoin and the journey it's taking me on, I'm discovering who Toma Strolight is. And that, as I point out in the article, is for each individual the greatest treasure they'll ever know. Right? It's the rarest and scarcest treasure. There's only one of each of us in the universe, and to get to know oneself is the greatest achievement you can, and to understand what satisfies you, because we're not all satisfied, by money in and of itself, as an end in and of itself, or as a one-step end into, spend all the money in the world. All the billionaires are not happier than the people living in villages, who can take care of themselves. So what is it that's unique about you, that's special about you, that you want to be and become? And so I think this whole self-actualization aspect of what Bitcoin allows, because it's very hard to discover who you are if you're being robbed constantly, if you're being used constantly, if you're being lied to constantly, if you're living in a world of fraud. What's the truth? Where's the truth in this? And how do I manage to discover the truth about myself if every time I produce something, somebody else secrets it away from me? So this to me is really kind of the core building block of what's fascinating me about Bitcoin. And then its cumulative efforts. Like, when you have a whole civilization of people who are free and able to achieve their full potential, what kind of civilization is that? How much more advanced and loving and peaceful is that than anything we've known throughout human history? And I don't know that you and I are necessarily going to get to see it. I don't know that I will. Maybe you will. You're younger than me. But even just experiencing the explosion of it starting to happen, right? This is like a giant bomb of peace and self-discovery went off, and it's still going off. It's just, the first million people are affected by it, infected by it, right? It's spreading like a virus, but not a virus that makes you sick, a virus that wakes you up, a virus that heals you. And so this remarkable phenomenon is taking place before our very eyes, and we're getting to witness, at least ourselves, leaving that fiat world, that dark and ugly world, and to step into the bright orange world that Bitcoin represents, and to see more and more people stepping into it. So it's a new frontier, and it's an amazing new frontier to experience, and it's just filled with incredible things. So for me, writing about it, experiencing it personally, watching other people experience it, being able to telegraph it, being able to point people in the direction of it, right? That this isn't something that you're going to use to make yourself rich and then sell it and buy a Lamborghini with it and then be bored of your Lamborghini and worried about crashing and all that. This is something that's going to help you attain self-enlightenment, self-actualization. That's really what it has me most excited. And I think, I just see more and more of it all the time. And I hope that, I don't know exactly what it's going to be like when it's bigger, but it's a really kind of magical time right now to have been in Bitcoin for a number of years at this point, and to be on the transition, and to see more people coming in, and to know that a large majority of them are going to experience the real magic of it later on. And they don't even know what it is, right? They think they've come in it as an investment to get a little bit richer than they otherwise would have been. Maybe they're really upset about inflation and they've somewhat persuaded that this thing will protect them from inflation. They have no idea what's coming, right? They have no idea that self-actualization lies at the end of this particular rabbit hole.
Yeah, and I guess what you were saying, like, it's this virus that infects. The only thing about it is you need to choose to take that orange pill. You need to infect yourself. Like, it's not coerced upon you. It's not like a super spreader, like what we had in 2020. Yeah. Toma, we need to do like a full-length podcast. You're absolutely fascinating, and dive into it. Like, we didn't even get into sort of a little bit. Bitcoin's a mirror that you hold up to yourself, or it's a reflection. Yeah. And I really believe, yes, like, I came here for number, go up, and that's great. Like, it changes pretty quickly for anyone watching. Just buy, stack, and chill. Buy, stack, and chill as much as you possibly can, and just hold on to it. It's not about getting rich quick, but if you do the right things, that most likely, whatever that is for you, will play out. But you realize very quickly, okay, like, that's sorted now. I'm not being stolen. My life's going to continue to get better. And it allows you just to live with joy and hope again, and then you can spread that message and the whole world's energy. So we've got this time, we've got this opportunity where there is a tool for good in the world. Take it, spread it, share it, use it, run your own node, be a sovereign individual like you're designed to be. Toma, I want to sit down for like 3 hours, man. The sun's coming up and I need to make the most of this. But what one little thing should people be doing now if they've never bought Bitcoin before and they're coming into the space? I'll hand it over to you, and I'll let you wrap up this morning.
Well, I think study Bitcoin is the first step, right? And there's nothing terribly original about saying that, but start from here. Read the story of how Bitcoin came to be. I encourage people, ask somebody, who was Satoshi Nakamoto? What exactly did he do? Or read the article I wrote about Satoshi Nakamoto. I think it's an interesting way to learn about it, rather than to dive headfirst into economics. If you're into economics, by all means, read Austrian economics, read Mises, read the Bitcoin Standard. But if you haven't yet and you're not interested in that, there's a different path here, and it's a much more interesting path, because I think not everybody is as money oriented or as economics, social sciences oriented as others, but everybody loves a great story. And the real true story of Bitcoin is like one of the greatest stories ever told, and it's true, and it's verifiably true. It's not something that happened hundreds or thousands of years ago, and in a different language and in a different place and in a different time. It happened in our modern civilization, and it's happening right now. And it is fascinating, and it will fill you with hope when you hear this story, and it'll potentially cure you of nihilism and depression and all these other things. So how? Well, just study it, and you'll see that there really is hope in this world, and that the despair that you may be feeling, the hopelessness, isn't a natural state. It is the consequence of a broken system that Bitcoin fixes. And you can just step outside of the broken system and step into the fixed system and heal.
Absolutely. I guess the biggest takeaway is read, study Bitcoin. When we fix the money, we fix the world. Toma, it's been an absolute pleasure. I've put all your
it's been a pleasure.
Links below.
Okay.
Everyone, if you haven't already, hit subscribe. We'll see you on the next video. Be blessed.